one of the most damaging things that could then happen, convince the general public as well that we were somehow involved.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. It's not difficult to see why Detective Amaral came up with a theory of a refrigerator. Just less than 2 years prior to the McCann incident, the murderers of an 8-year-old girl, Joana Cipriano, in Figueira, a village near Portimao in Portugal's Algarve region, and it was less than 7 miles from the hotel where Madeleine disappeared. Well, they confessed to freezing this little girl's body. And of course, Amaral was the detective. He was working on that particular case 2 years before the Madeleine McCann case. So it happened in May 2005. The Cipriano case was the first murder trial in Portuguese legal history to take place without the discovery of a body. And so you literally have a huge case involving this detective, followed in short shrift by a very similar case. A little girl goes missing with very little trace of her body. So it would be unusual for the lead cop in that investigation, where a little girl vanished, not to imagine similar circumstances with Madeleine. The question is, was he right in making this inference? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If there's an area of the McCann case that you feel like I need to look at or look at in more detail, let me know in the comments. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So we're going to look at the final couple of paragraphs in his interview with that publication Correio da Manha. It's kind of like the Daily Mail. It's like a daily publication for Portugal. And so what he deals with here is, in this last section, is this idea of the cadaver being frozen. They ask him, what do you think happened to the body? Amaral answers, everything indicated that the body, after having been at a certain location, was moved into another location by car 20-something days later. With the residues that were found inside the car, the little girl had to have been transported inside it. And obviously the critical question here is, what does he mean by certain location? It was at a certain location and then moved into another location by car. What was that certain location? And then the publication asks, how can you state that? How do you know that? And he responds, due to the type of fluid, we policemen experts say that the cadaver was frozen or preserved in the cold, and when placed into the car boot with the heat at that time of the year, bear in mind this was, I guess, June, somewhere around May, June, part of the ice melted. On a curb, for example, something fell from the trunk's right side above the wheel. It may be said that this is speculation, but it's the only way to explain what happened there. And it's 100% true and right that this is speculation. It's speculation because it's a kind of a missing piece of the puzzle from Amaral's theory. He's got quite a good theory, quite a coherent theory, but this is the critical piece that's missing. And he's speculating, and of course he was thrown off the case before and while they were trying to verify this aspect. They were actually trying to investigate and search apartments specifically for refrigerators and to investigate this particular part. And so that never really happened. The next question he's asked is, if the body was hidden in the beach area first, was it always out of reach for the searchers? He responds, the beach was searched at a time when it is not known whether the body was still there. Using dogs, but sniffer dogs have limitations, like the salted water, for example. Later on, it may have been removed. Now, one case that reminds me a little bit of this case is the Nora Quoirin case. You can search an area And if someone then is moved back into that area, if they're not alive, or if they are alive, if they are moved back into an area that's been searched, well, they're not going to search that area again. And that could have happened in this case. It seems like something like that may have happened in the Nora Quoirin case. I wrote a book about that. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description. I'm not quite sure what the detective is referring to when he says sniffer dogs. I'm not sure if he means scent dogs. There's a difference between searching for the scent of someone who's alive and moving above ground to cadaver and blood dogs who are searching essentially for a deceased person. So I'm not sure if he's saying they were searching eastern Praia da Luz for someone that was moving above the ground.
Well, that's a very entertaining story, but unfortunately real detectives have to worry about that little thing called evidence.
On paper, Amaral's theory makes sense. In practice, we have to concern ourselves with that little thing called evidence. And obviously, Amaral is an evidence dude. But the question is just how much evidence is there to support Amaral's refrigerator theory? The short answer is not much. What about the longer answer? And of course, this goes into speculation and areas that are not necessarily scientific, I guess, not necessarily something that you can necessarily prove. But this is a critical issue. So much rests on the meaning behind Amaral's words, the type of fluid. Is he saying that there was some chemical associated with refrigerators mixed with fluid from a deceased human being? If so, that would be important evidence. In July 2010, so 3 years after the incident, an informal group of bloggers interviewed Detective Amaral. Among several questions presented to the Portuguese detective was this one: do you think the body was refrigerated? Amaral answered, yes. The bodily fluid in the car showed that. If the body had been buried, there would have been mummification. The fact that there were fluids points to refrigeration. On paper, again, it's quite a good argument that if the body had been left somewhere and not preserved using the cold, it would have turned essentially to dust. The heat and so on would have assisted in this process of decay and decomposition. But this seems indicative that no specific giveaway chemicals were found, but rather there was just a liquid. There was liquid traces of a body, apparently. And this is halfway to evidence, but it's not quite sufficient for what we're looking for. I mean, it supposes that there could be a refrigerator, but it's not really providing any proof of a refrigerator, if that makes sense. Then he's also asked, where do you think the body was kept? Amaral answers, that is what we were trying to understand when I left the investigation. And that is another way of saying, I don't know. And that is a serious problem in this case. Okay, so it was kept in a refrigerator. Where was it kept in a refrigerator? I don't know. That is a crucial part of this piece, of this puzzle that's missing. He goes on to say, 15 alleles might not have been conclusive in the eyes of the public prosecutor, but for the investigation, it was sufficient. The body must have been in the boot of the car. We want to know who drove the car and who was behind the wheel. In May 2019, I visited Praia da Luz to try to investigate this idea of a cadaver being kept outside and where it might have been kept outside before being placed in either a refrigerator or a vehicle or both. Was it possible to have a cadaver outside in East Luz, Praia da Luz, without a refrigerator and not leave a smell? Theoretically, there were a number of ways to achieve this. A shallow grave on the less populated east side, the body placed in a rock pool underwater, on the less populated east side, the body placed deep inside a stormwater drain pipe, which are also plentiful on the less populated east side, the body placed under a fishing boat or near a drain where there were other odors. In other words, there is an odor, but it gets confused with the strong odors of fish, sewage, salty air, or a combination of these. and that was something I wanted kind of to investigate myself on the ground. The coastal area is also windswept, so even if there are odours, they're going to be quickly diluted by offshore winds. It's also true that the east side of Luge is used for fishing, and there would necessarily be refrigerators, including outdoor refrigerators for fishermen to store bait. So it wouldn't be that unusual to find refrigerators in that setting. And so how was Amaral's idea treated in the media? Well, in July 2014, 7 years after the incident, Kate McCann was asked to respond specifically to these allegations from Amaral. According to the Mirror, quote, Kate branded the allegation far-fetched and added, "It was about Madeleine being killed and us having moved the body and then storing her in a freezer and then transporting the body in a hire car several weeks later. And yesterday," and so that's the end of the quote, "yesterday the pair told how allegations made in a book by disgraced Portuguese detective Amaral left them crushed and devastated." Kate said that the policeman's claims left her unable to sleep at night and are hampering the hunt for Madeleine, who vanished from the family's Algarve holiday apartment in 2007. The 46-year-old former GP told a court that she believed Amaral's book, The Truth of the Lie, had turned the Portuguese people against the couple. Kate also revealed the policeman's smears had reached the ears of their 9-year-old son, who asked her, "Mr. Amaral said that you hid Madeleine, didn't he?" It was very painful to read, and I felt sad for Madeleine, and I also felt anxious and fearful because of the damage I felt it was doing in Portugal. For example, he insists Madeleine was dead. He also essentially accuses myself and my husband of being somehow involved in her disappearance and of faking an abduction. Throughout the book, he consistently smears myself and my husband. Kate and Jerry are suing Amaral for libel. And we know at the end of that long process, this was an article published in 2014, 8 years later, the McCanns would basically lose their legal battle to suppress this narrative, to silence the detective. Now, if we go back in time, if we go back quite a lot further, we see not one but two relatives of Kate responding in the media to the same allegations, which shows how long they've been floating around and just how sticky, in a sense, these allegations are. In a police statement on the 15th of April 2008, so less than a year after the incident, Jerry's brother-in-law, Alexander Cameron, said, quote, "On one occasion, I believe it was on July of 2007, I took Patricia to the supermarket. We carried bags in the boot of the Renault Scenic. We bought various items, including fresh shrimp, fish, and beef. When we unloaded the shopping bags, we noticed that blood has run out of the bottom of the plastic bag," end quote. Now, what's interesting, this statement basically acknowledges Amaral's idea of liquid blood that's carried into the vehicle that then leaks into the vehicle as fact. The explanation is saying that provides a scenario that basically accommodates this version of events. Going back to the statement, quote, "After the shopping trip and still in the month of July 2007, I began to notice a strange odor in the car. I did not give it much importance and assumed it was likely due to the leakage from the rubbish bags or from the blood which had escaped from the shopping bags. As a result, we removed the carpet from the boot in order to clean it. I tossed the boot carpet," I think it means he beat the carpet, beating it with a broom or something like that to remove any particles, and cleaned it with a wet cloth and left it to air out. This is also a major concession, suggesting that blood of a particular sort did cause a stench. Not only that blood was in the vehicle, but there was enough of it in the vehicle that caused a severe smell, a stench in the vehicle, and that blood leaked out of some container. Then there was another relative that was also using the rental car. This was Kate's cousin's brother, Michael Wright. He attributed the smell to a different etiology in a 16th of April 2008 police interview. Quote, I noted some disagreeable smells on a number of occasions, which I judged to have come from the twins' nappies. Discarded nappies were collected in rubbish bags and held until thrown in the rubbish bins, thereby provoking smell." End quote. Now, what I think also possible is if a cadaver was in some kind of a sealed container with a plastic or some kind of bin or something like that, that would also prevent it from drying out in a certain sense. But once again, we have a relative of Kate providing a scenario, this time involving smells. What's very compelling about this is precisely what you expect to be most difficult to conceal, an odor, and it seems to find its way into the rear compartment of the rental vehicle. Like Casey Anthony, whose vehicle also needed airing, she blamed a bag of rubbish for the smell, not particularly convincing. He went on to say, "I have no knowledge of anything spilling from any article nor of any cleaning of the car after such a hypothetical spill." So he's basically saying that we didn't clean the car and it wasn't such a bad smell. And based on this article, it also says that the Portuguese waste disposal system requires residents to take their rubbish to a rubbish dump. There are no garbage trucks. And this may be the reason why that happened, why this vehicle went to a nearby rubbish dump. There is also this alleged reference to a refrigerator apparently recorded in November 2007, less than 7 months after the incident. And this is posted on by Bailey Boy, posted on a blog called British Proof Reporting McCann.blogspot.com. So it's on a blog. During the summer months, Jerry had wrote in his blog that the freezer at the rented villa had broken and he took it to the dump. The blog was edited within 24 hours. There was a large thread about it on here. I remember that in one of the Portuguese papers, the owners of the villa saying they were not informed of the breakdown and that Jerry had replaced the freezer. Now, this is extremely difficult to know what to do with because it's in a blog format. It's not reported anywhere in the news media. And we don't have the original blog and we don't have Jerry's word. So it's kind of up to, do you take this blogger, this anonymous blogger, at his word? I'm only mentioning it because it's part of this narrative involving the refrigerator. Again, this is incredible information if it's true, but the question is, has the blog been cached or archived? If not, well, then it's of dubious value. The blogger goes on to say, "I also believe that all the apartments in the Ocean Club are privately owned and all have fridges and freezers. I also recently found out that the apartment the McCanns moved to from 5A, blah, blah, blah." Well, the problem with that whole line of thinking is I was in Praia de Luz and I, stayed in a hotel and the refrigerator was pretty small. And even poor little Joanna Cipriano would not have been able to fit into a refrigerator. So, even though there are refrigerators, that story is just not going to really work. And you might say, well, that should be the end of that. But then there's an article on the 29th of September, 2007. The headline is titled, "Maddie Body Was Stored in a Freezer." And we'll deal with that in the next episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.